Thank you, Michael. Good evening. And thank you to Chaucer's for, are we running here?
Yes.
And thank you to Chaucer's for hosting us tonight. What a great house to be in. Look at the piles of books. Love that. Well, tonight we'll be interviewing the author of this book, The Dark Room, a memoir of triumph, Claudia Chotzen. I've known Claudia for, the last 25 years. We've become good friends. Claudia actually grew up in Seattle, and it was near the area that I grew up in. I didn't know her at the time, but I'm thankful for the friendship since then. Claudia Chotzen is a remarkable woman. To know Claudia is to know just a beautiful heart. Love you.
I love you too.
Even if you knew Claudia well, you might never suspect her story. And as it unfolds, it's a shocking story. In her book, she has the courage to lay bare all of the elements, all of those pieces that get woven together into her life. The book also gives us a powerful story of Claudia's own transformation, and I hope you, like me, find inspiration in her journey. Claudia is being interviewed tonight by one of the brightest, most insightful counselors and friends I know, Ann Sarvis. I had the good fortune years ago to get her to marry me, and we're still married, despite all my flaws.
Thank you, Brad.
Claudia.
Hello, good evening. So happy to see everybody here. So honored, and as someone who has really known Claudia and really loves her, I'm so honored to sit here beside her and interview her, and I'm so honored that you asked me. So thank you. I want to congratulate you on the launch of your book. It's been a journey for you, I know, but all of us have been there with you, and we're just so proud of you. And we really hope that in getting this out there, you get to fly as much as you desire, because even though you already have wings. Claudia's going to read a part of her book that we thought would be a good inlet to everything else, and then we'll interview and then ask questions and give answers.
And then Ann and I talked about a little introduction for those of you who don't know anything about my life or the book before I read. And that is that I'm one of 8 kids. It's 7 brothers and sisters, and all grown up now and all have families and children. And our parents were Holocaust refugees, Holocaust survivors, who both made it out of Germany separately. That my mother was about 11 years old and my father was in his early 20s. They didn't know each other. They met in this country. They fortunately, they and their parents and their siblings were able to get out alive. They both lost dozens and dozens of family members, cousins, and relatives in the Holocaust, in the concentration camps. And so that was sort of the way that I came into the world, was that my parents met each other in New York. They fell in love. They were married within 3 months. They moved to Seattle, Washington, because they felt that Seattle was very much like parts of Germany. They had each lived in different parts of Germany, and they wanted an outdoor life. They liked the mountains. They liked skiing. So they moved to Seattle, and then they had 8 children. Now, my mother wanted a dozen, and my father compromised at 4. At 8. I mean, he wanted 4, and they compromised at 8. My mother often told us that she wanted to replace those that were lost in the Holocaust, and that was our purpose, which is a pretty hard responsibility to hear about when you're a kid, that your purpose is to replace people that were killed in the Holocaust. And in the meantime, she was a professional photographer, which was very unusual in the 1950s and the 1960s, that she was a career woman, had a career, started out with my brother and sister who were twins, and then raised all of us, and we all were expected to excel, and we did in different areas, and then we were also considered the ideal family. And people, just talked constantly about, all of us were good at different topics and subjects, dance and music and all the different things, and that's what the book talks a lot about. The original title of the book was Picture Perfect, because that's what people thought we were, was a picture perfect family. But what was happening was that my parents had a very dark side that was very hidden from the world. They were also heroes in the civil rights movement in Seattle, especially my mother. She was very well known. There's a book in Seattle that was published a few years ago called Seattle in Black and White, and one of the people featured is my mother, because she was so involved in the civil rights movement. We would go on marches with her. We would go to also Vietnam War marches. We were all very involved. She politicized all of us. And they talked a lot about justice and having people treated equally, and the way that they were not treated in Germany. They didn't want to happen what happened to them and their families in Germany. They didn't want us to have that experience. So they purposely moved us into the almost all black neighborhood of Seattle at the time. And because they wanted us to know that nobody is different based on the color of their skin or their religion or their background. And therefore we would know that people are all equal. So the contrast of the fact that she was a real hero in the civil rights movement, and our family was very visible, known, admired by everybody. And then at night, my mother was molesting me, starting from the time I was a very, very young girl. And they even took a closet that was next to their bedroom, and they had the closet turned into a bedroom for me, so that I was right next door and very accessible. And that's what this story is about, which is this sort of dual existence that I led of, performing on the outside. We were always supposed to be happy. We were always supposed to be grateful to our parents for what great parents they were. My father constantly told us that I had the best mommy in the world, and this would be the next day after she had just visited me in the bedroom at night. And so the juxtaposition of the two worlds that I lived in was the everyday reality, and it's a very crazy making reality, because you don't get any truth. The world is telling you have the best family in the world and the best parents in the world. So that's the story, and the dark details, and as Brian said, some of the horrific stuff, it's all in the book. But what I have chosen to focus on, and what I really feel like my purpose with the book is the transformation, and the fact that I was able to get through it, and the fact that I lived a life where I felt as a child, the whole childhood, hopeless and a dark place, and that that it would never change. And it is thoroughly changed, to the point where I now have a life with the most beautiful community here in Santa Barbara, as you are all seeing each other around here, old and new, and dear friends, and dear close relationships with all of my siblings, which has been one of the most amazing parts is the ripple effects of having finally published the book and having my siblings' lives also change. And that's a whole big part of the story. So before that, I wanted to have you have the context before I read. Okay, Jimmy. Okay, this is a very short piece. This is the introduction to the book, and it kind of gives you a sense. It's titled Honolulu, which is where Hap and my husband Hap is over here, by the way, with him for 50 years. Thank you. And it's titled Honolulu, 1975 and 2005. And it's the way the book opens, and you will get an overview of the book from it. Let me get it. Just like two. Yeah. We'll get a sip of water before I read. Thank you. Okay. The first time I met my future husband, No, let me start that over again. It wasn't when I met you.
We're not doing that.
No, we're not. The first time my future husband met my mother, she was naked, stark naked. I was in college, but had accepted a winter semester internship in Honolulu and was living at my parents' home there. Hap had flown to Hawaii to surprise me for the Valentine's Day weekend. I was surprised by his visit, but he was a lot more surprised by my mother. My parents were aware of Hap's visit. They knew the flight arrival time and that my sister Naomi and I would bring him directly from the airport to their home. Yet my mother, Carla, answered the door without a stitch of clothing. Her body was brown from the sun, lean and strong from her daily regimen of tennis, swimming, yoga, and hiking. Her breasts were small and a little saggy from nursing 8 children, her hair a brilliant white. She flashed her most dazzling smile and acted coquettish, almost curtsied. She mumbled some sort of greeting and gave him a welcome hug before she walked out the door, still naked, a threadbare towel slung over her shoulder, explaining that she was heading down the pathway to the beach for a quick swim before dinner. Hap struggled to speak coherently. Your mother, is she usually, I mean, the lack of clothes. Did she not realize I was coming? Oh, she realized, I said. Hap was shocked, not just by her naked greeting, but also by a sudden awareness that I accepted her nudity as normal, that I wasn't particularly embarrassed. I had been conditioned all my life, 22 years at that moment, to admire my mother's openness, to praise her quirky behavior, to view other people who followed established social norms as uptight. Everyone in my family celebrated my mom's free spirit. During the prior 4 months of our courtship, Hap had collected bits and pieces about my family. Parents who were Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany and politically active, details about my 7 siblings, how everyone was expected to excel at something, how we were all compelled to enjoy skiing, hiking, tennis, and swimming. I had made my family members almost mythological beings through vivid stories. We were a proud and loyal tribe, true to each other, family first. Apparently, I had forgotten to mention that my mother didn't like to wear clothes. 30 years later, Hap and I and our 2 sons are back in Honolulu to visit my mother. I am 52, almost exactly the age my mother was when Hap first met her. She no longer recognizes us, and as always, her behavior is wildly unpredictable. And she is still strong, athletic, and nimble. However, her advanced Alzheimer's now renders even the simplest task a formidable challenge. We had decided to take her out for a picnic lunch, but after spending 10 minutes trying to coax her into our rental car, both sides were eager to surrender. Where are we going? She asks again. I tell her for the 3rd time that we are going to Makapu'u Beach for a picnic. Oh, that sounds nice, she replies appreciatively, before veering sharply into a divergent thought. Why would I want to do that? I can eat lunch at home. Given how difficult it has been to cajole her into the car and the risk in transporting her anywhere, it's a reasonable question. The goal was to get her safely situated in the middle of the back seat between our 2 sons, Zach and Willie, 18 and 14, to prevent her from jumping out of the car at a stop sign and wandering into traffic. She has already established a new pattern of fleeing from family and caregivers without warning, an escape artist courting danger. But now that she is finally secured in the middle of the back seat, we have started the 10-minute drive. She rubs my son's thighs and strokes their cheeks. Such handsome young men, she coos. Pointing to me in the driver's seat, she wants to know, is that your mom? What does she do? Zach answers. I recall that he looked at me first to get permission to answer, and made a connection, and but then he answered. He said, yes, Carla, that's our mom, your daughter, Claudia, and she's writing a book. A book? How exciting. What's it about? It's a book about her life, Zach answers cautiously. Carla considers this thoughtfully and then adds matter-of-factly, I bet I'm in it and I think I might be naked.
To begin the interview, I'm going to begin with the last book that I just read, and it's James by Percival Everett. And it is an offshoot story, just like Wicked is to the Wizard of Oz, of Jim, the slave from Huckleberry Finn. And so I'm reading this book, and I'm thinking about Claudia, and I'm thinking about this interview, and there was a passage in the book that just pops out, and it was where James is watching a horrific assault on a young slave, and he realizes that to be a slave, you are completely naked to the rest of the world. You're defenseless, you're vulnerable, you're helpless, and you're full of shame. And we talked about that, and I just thought it was a good segue into the whole of this theme, because you just read that your mother came to the door completely naked in a different context to meet your future husband, and she was in control, and she had no shame, and she made a choice to do it, and she was powerful in her nakedness. And I feel that you have come full circle and have a lot more power than she could ever have over you, and I just wanted to start there.
Great, that's great. Yeah. She was a very, very dynamic, charismatic woman, and she would be a great, woman in a movie, like, because she just commanded wherever she was, whatever room she was in. I have one friend who used to say, she was a childhood friend, and she said, your mom was like a goddess. She said she would enter the room and she would move through it. My mother was very beautiful, and she was able to just really communicate well, and she just really had everybody in her orbit. But she really had a dark side, but that was the side that she really kept hidden. And so that is very much a story of her power, and of how it took me so long to stand up and to say no to her. And it was almost like, I would describe my family like a cult, that she ran it, and she ran my father, and my father was really so much, he worshipped her. Mm-hmm. Exactly right. My father worshipped her and didn't want to do anything. He was so amazed that she would love a man like him. And I also think they came out of the war, excuse me, the Holocaust, and they had so much fear in them that I think we were sort of all 8 of us born right out of that into a fearful place. And so what we did was we just didn't contradict anything. We just, told them all the time. In fact, we competed for who could love them, who could be more grateful to them.
So, I guess I don't want to give away the whole book, but one of the things that resonate with me is that, there's a whole family dynamic around this dynamic. And to come out and to be able to release this within yourself is such a huge step. And we talked about when that pivotal time was. Can you tell us about that? I think that's not giving away too much.
Yeah, so I talk in the book about getting into a peer counseling group that was up in Seattle, Washington, that one of my friends got into when I was about 15. And that was the first time, and that was called reevaluation counseling. It was also a real big in Santa Barbara, if any of you were here years ago. And that was the first time that I really started to get to share feelings, and people would be we learned how in a class to be counselors to each other. And that was sort of starting, I would say, in my teenage years, the first glimmers that my life and our family wasn't everything that we were being told it was, which was perfect. And then, but the real standing up to her didn't come until I gave birth to our first son, Zach, who is in the book. I was 34 years old, and it was at that point, and you'll see the story in the book about things she began to do, because we lived in Honolulu, close to them, where I realized I had to wake up, because if I knew these things I had been knowing and kind of keeping them under the surface and staying quite a bit in denial. We all still stood behind, stood by and supported her. And that was the turning point where I realized this is the next generation, and this is my son. And if I don't protect him, this is going to go on, and that's when I really had to wake up and you know.
And break the cycle.
Break the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's very much a story of breaking the cycle,
Right.
and it's very much my goal and my hope that that's what the message of the book is about. That, you know, so many of us keep things so locked in, and secrets that we keep, and don't have the courage to share them. And then when we finally do, great things can happen. I mean, the ripple effect in my family has been astounding. And but it was so scary so many times, and it wasn't just scary one time. It was so scary time after time. Whenever and it doesn't all come all at once. You don't just. I mean, I did therapy work for the whole time. I'm still doing it. You don't just get to the point where it's all gone and done. But it comes in waves, and I would say the biggest wave is the shame that I felt there was too much shame to tell the story. That people wouldn't want to hear it. It would be too icky, too yucky. And that was how editors reacted early when the book, right away, an agent in New York was interested in it, and she thought it would be like the next Glass Castle. She said, you go get champagne, you guys sit down, this is going to be huge bestseller. She said, I've never believed in any book as much as this one, and she had published many, many, many bestsellers. And then when she started taking it to publishers, they started saying, we couldn't put it down, it was riveting, it was compelling, we think it's a great book, but we don't want to talk about a book where a mother molests her child, or especially a daughter or a son. And that was when I really began to realize that, we put our mothers on pedestals in our culture, and they should be. We are the fierce protectors of our children, but that these editors, these publishers felt like people can't handle a story that this actually goes on in the world, and then I kind of took a step back and thought, okay, people don't really want to hear it. It's already doing so much good in my own family. I'll just leave it on a shelf. And then that's the point when I began to realize that if we don't talk about these things, then they're never going to change. And if we don't talk about that, they do happen. And as I found out since I've published it, they happen much more than we actually realize. And it's the only way that we're going to change it is if it comes out in the culture and becomes public, and then we can protect those children that it's happening to, and get help for the mothers, that may be doing this. So,
we talk a lot about being an authentic self, and from the day I met you, I always thought that you were just so confident and authentic and just loving and giving and all those good things. And I don't know how anyone could be even more than how I was introduced to you, but it's like a glowingness about it now that you get this it's not an opportunity, you gave yourself the opportunity to come out with all this, and Claudia is helping so many others. I mean, there's a website that she has, and people are contacting her, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting contacted by people who are saying that they kept the secrets. One woman in her 70s said that her father had molested her, and she said it's not the same story because she stood up to him. She was 17. She wasn't young and a young child, but she said she stood up to him, but then she never told anyone. And here, reading my book, actually she said she couldn't read my book for a long time. She bought it, she ordered it, she bought it, and then she hid it from herself for a long time. But when she finally read it, she said it was the courage to finally admit what had happened to her at 17. And now she's doing her therapy work on it. And then I'll just say that one of my sisters, who we thought was the last one that would ever go to this place. In fact, she was somebody who said, do not ever publish this. I don't want this ever out. And then she had an experience where she finally decided she wanted to read it after several years. And now she is using it, she said, as her map in her therapy twice a week, and recalling all of the other things that go with it for her. And she just wrote me again yesterday about, I mentioned this before, I think to Ann, that one of my biggest griefs was that I was the middle of 8 children, but I really wished I could have protected the younger kids. And that was just almost harder for me than what was happening to me on a regular basis, which was something that I just got used to and lived with, but I knew it was happening to my siblings and I couldn't protect them. And so I was tearfully telling the sister, I just, so wanted to protect you so much. And she just wrote me the other day and said, you did protect me. It just took lots of years to get there, but now it's happened. And so that's been an amazing story. All of my siblings, different stories with each one of them, but that's been amazing. So.
Through this whole journey, what is the most, what would you tell people about being a child of such abuse, of being a teenager of such abuse? You said something about your parents not protecting you, or your siblings when you were growing up as well. And so there's just so many layers to all this. When you think about this, what's the biggest layer?
I think
onion layer.
The onion layer, I think, is when people are abused, we can't control it, and we look to our parents for the ones to be our protectors, and when they're not, and it turns out that they're the perpetrators, then you have no choice, I think, except to then think it's about me. It must be something I'm doing. It must be something about me. So I grew up just feeling like I was a dirty, dirty person. And it's taken me years and incredible therapists who know about abuse and what it does to people, to constantly say, if police had come to the house, they wouldn't have arrested you, they would have arrested your parents. And to keep getting that separated, that, it wasn't anything bad or wrong or dirty about me that brought it. It was my parents, and they were never given, they were never got the chance or took the chance or were able to heal from their wounds for whatever reasons. And so I think that shame stays with us, and it comes in layers. I mean, it comes again, and then it's like waves coming in. I felt like, and sometimes the waves really knock me down. But what I would say is, as that little girl, I felt so hopeless and so much in such a dark place for so long. And I would want to tell other people, that don't give up, because you can get to the other side of it. You can't do it alone. We need each other. I've needed all these people, all of you that have supported me. We can't go there by ourselves, but we can get there. And I would tell them not to give up. So.
And I'm going to end with your relationship with Hap.
Yes.
Because we've known you for quite some time, been married 50 years, and we just admire you both so much and love you so much. And can you tell us a little bit more about that support and that encouragement? And
well, he's been the through line. You've been I'll say you, because he's standing right there. You've been the through line. He never ever said what's wrong with you, or I would say, from the beginning, so this is something we haven't talked about here. I would tell him how I knew I left my body, that that's what people who are in trauma and are abused do. And that was my way of coping, was when my mother was in the room at night, I would just, as soon as I would be in a deep dream and then feel her heavy weight on top of me, I was a little girl, then I would just go up to the ceiling, and that's where I would be. And I talk about that in the book. So that was pretty much my coping mechanism for everything. I think that by the time I got to be even just 8 or 9 years old, I was not even in my body at all. I was just, I used to say that I felt like just a shell, and that I could talk to you, and I could be there with you, but I wasn't there. And I think today professionals would understand that that's abuse and what happens, the dissociation. But I don't think in the 50s and 60s, number one, we didn't talk about it, and number two, I don't think doctors and even teachers seem to know. And so even when I then met Hap, which was in my early 20s, I remember telling you that I leave my body, and when I do that, I want to stop, whatever it is, whatever we're doing, if we're going to make love, whatever. I don't want to be like that. Don't want that anymore. And here was you never ever said any pressure, nothing. I don't think you understood it, because I don't think I understood it in those days either.
There's a lot of things I never understood.
Right.
So we made it this far.
We made it right this far. That's right. So, and you've always been supportive. My whole process has been therapy all the way through, and that's something that you've supported. And so I'm very grateful to you for walking the journey with me. Even just a few days ago, I came home and had to tell you what was going on, and you got it. So that's what I would say. He gets it. So, okay.
We'll end because there's questions maybe, and I hope she has some answers.
Yeah, I don't know.
But there's a lot more I could ask you, but I think, I would really encourage you to read the book. It's wonderfully written. I mean, for a first-time book, I just can't believe how engaging it is and enticing. So it's uncomfortable, of course, but a lot of things in life that are worth knowing and feeling are uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I look at Claudia and I think of all the developmental stages that you may have not been able to go through at the time when they were developing, right?
Right.
And that's just huge that you are here today the way you are. I mean, because you're way ahead of most.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Yes. So do we have time for questions?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.